Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another SETA webinar on Ayasofya. Last week on Friday, Ayasofya reverted back to a mosque status, and since then it has been a lot of news, a lot of reports about this decision of the Turkish government and the opening ceremony. And today we will discuss this issue with two most important foreign policy analysts who have deep knowledge about the Ayasofya and the cultural heritage in Turkey. We have Professor Dr. Akif Kireççi and Professor Dr. Çağrı Erhan with us, and their bios are available in our ad, so I will skip that part, and we will directly start the conversation with Professor Akif Kireççi. Before we start about what happened and how the decision was made, can you tell us a little bit about the cultural significance of Ayasofya for Turkey and for world, of course?
Well, this architectural piece was a magnificent piece, and since the early Ottoman times, Ottomans actually admired this architectural structure. And after the conquest of Constantinople, Mehmed II actually visited and took a big pride in preserving and protecting this monument, if you will. And how can you understand the importance of this piece for our historical experiences is that, number one, Mehmed II made a lot of efforts, provided financial resources in order to preserve and maintain the building. It was him who actually converted the building to a mosque, but still the Christian community at the time in Constantinople remained functional, and not only Orthodox communities, but also Mehmed II invited Armenians to Istanbul, to Constantinople, and also the Jews to Constantinople. For him, it was the center of his empire, and therefore all religions within his empire should be represented. That's how he felt. This is the political aspect of it. And then the second aspect is that architecturally, this building inspired many Ottoman architects, which is clearly visible in other Ottoman monumental mosques, what we call as Salatin mosques, the mosques that were built by Ottoman sultans. So if you look at the Sultan Ahmed, which is known as Blue Mosque, next to or across the Hagia Sophia, it is actually a kind of competition between the architects of these two monuments, as if Ottoman architect is telling to the world that, look, this is what I built, and this is what Eastern Roman architects, the Byzantine architects built. Which one is better? The third aspect, and then you can see architecturally the masterpiece of Mimar Sinan, the chief architect of the Ottoman court. Again, another, it's not replication, but inspiration is in Selimiye, which is in Adrianople, Edirne. These pieces are excellent pieces. They are, before the World Heritage Organization was established, they were preserved for centuries. So this is another aspect. The third aspect, which is very important, there are 5 Ottoman sultans buried in Ayasofya, Hagia Sophia. Perhaps this is known, but least people know the following fact is that more than 150, almost around 150 members of the Ottoman royal family is buried also there. Mehmed II also built a complex around Hagia Sophia, a soup kitchen, children's school, a university, so on and so forth. So it became a living center, a living worship, if you will. That is the concept. So the grand worship, the house of worship, it was for Ottomans, and it has been for the modern Turks also. this is the importance, cultural importance of this architectural monument. And throughout the centuries, Ottomans spent a lot of money, a lot of efforts. During the 19th century, for instance, they invited some Swiss architect in order to sort of repair and restore some of the aspects of the Hagia Sophia. And there are several aspects of this, and even today, during several decades, there was a group of people who were actually working on how to preserve. If there is one piece from the, let's say, from the pieces, be it a brick, be it something else, need to be changed. A lot of other groups actually had to it has to go through several approval mechanisms in order for that specific piece to change or replaced and renewed also and so forth. So it's very well preserved, dear architectural piece in history, and also it has religious connotations for many Muslims in Turkey and abroad.
Now I want to go to Professor Erhan, and Professor Erhan had a career working on Turkish-American relationship and especially the history of it. And one of the critical moments was the conversion of this mosque to a museum status. And there has been a lot of debates about how the decision was made in the first years of the Republic. There is the direct influence of probably the Byzantine Institute that was opened in the United States. Can you tell us how this process took place in the first years of the Republic?
Indeed, it is the most important aspect of this process, because we are talking about transforming the museum into its original form, a mosque, but most of the debate is about contemporary political and social aspects, and we do not focus on the real reason why the High Court took this decision. In order to understand the origins, we have to go back to 86 years ago. An American archaeologist, Thomas Whitmore, which is known to Byzantine studies, traveled Turkey several times before Ayasofya was transformed into a museum. And he applied to Turkish government in order to make some research, some archaeological research in Ayasofya premises, and the permission was granted. After his initial research, he also applied to meet with Atatürk, founder of Turkish Republic, and this meeting was realized in 1934 in Ankara. Thomas Whitmore is a very important figure because he is also one of the founders of Byzantine Institute, which is known with its archaeological works over this period. Therefore, Atatürk wanted to see him. He traveled to Ankara, and in Çankaya kiosk, the presidential palace, Atatürk received him. After a talk, he went back to the United States. But after this meeting with Thomas Whitmore, during a feast in Çankaya, during a dinner, he opened the discussion whether it's a good idea to change Ayasofya's status or not. So he wanted to learn from the audience, from the participants in this dinner, whether this will be a good idea or not. Some supported and some did not. We know what had spoken, what had been discussed in this dinner, almost 100%, because one of the attendees of this dinner, who was then the Minister of Education, Zeynel Abidin Özmen, wrote this into the Ayasofya's memorial book with his own handwriting. So we should not forget his name, because he is one of the main actors in this status-changing operation, Zeynel Abidin Özmen. And I refer to him as a historian. He said, after this dinner, Atatürk gave him an oral directive, and he said, go and speak with the prime minister and make the preparations to change Ayasofya status into museum. However, there was a big obstacle in this process. According to Turkish law, the current Turkish law, and then this historical Turkish law, the civil code, and the law of foundations, as a foundation status could not be changed into another form than which was written in its own deed of foundation or certificate of foundation. And Ayasofya was a foundation which was founded by Mehmet II after the conquest of Istanbul in 1462, when Mehmet II made a deed for the foundation. He also included Ayasofya in this official legal certificate. And of course, the foundations do not lose their status, even the state change, because they are under protection of law. Then Abidin Özmen, the main
Professor Erhan, can I interfere for a few moments
yes,
in order to explain this foundation thing, which I think is very critical for our audience to comprehend what really is the status of foundation. This foundation Mehmet II actually established is one of the major reasons why this monument is preserved for centuries. Why? Because he actually devoted several lands, estates, shops, income-generating businesses to simply give some of their percentages in their income to this foundation. This is how historical monuments are have been preserved so far. So that is a very important thing, and based on even the Ottoman law and again the current law, no one is, including the state itself, is supposed to touch the income-generating business or incomes of this foundation.
Thank you for contribution. I have to add something more, maybe, because yes, Mehmet II, he devoted a lot of incomes to this foundation, but just a few decades after him, his grandson, Süleyman the Magnificent, he enlarged the amount, the income of this foundation, not particularly for Ayasofya, but for also many other remainings before the Ottoman Empire. And this is the main reason why Ottoman sultans throughout centuries made a lot of restorations to preserve this magnificent building. And now, after more than 1,400 years, 1,500 years of its building, we still have this magnificent building with the contribution of Ottoman architects, including Mimar Sinan, the chief architect of Ottoman Empire. When we come back to 1934, Abidin Özmen, the main actor of this status-changing operation, he was facing with a very big obstacle, because there was a foundation, there was a law, and it was impossible to change the status of the mosque into a museum with this obstacle. Therefore, he made a plan. He talked with the director of foundations, and he said, as the Minister of Education, I will send you an official letter and will ask you about the status of the mosque, whether it is a foundation or not. If your reply will be negative, which means, no, this is not a mosque, then we can write a decree to change its status into a museum. And all the process happened as it was planned. Minister of Education Abidin Özmen wrote, and now I brought here all the official documents from Turkish archives. So anyone watching this can online enter to Turkish archives webpage and can reach all these documents. Of course, they are all in Turkish. In 1934, Abidin Özmen, the Minister of Education, wrote a letter to Directorate of Foundations and asked them whether Ayasofya is a foundation or not. And the reply is quite interesting. It's here, I brought it. This is the official letter of the Directorate of Foundations. It says, and I will translate, since this mosque is a building which was inherited from the Byzantine age, it has no foundation. So this sentence is the basic argument of the Prime Ministry decree which changes the status of Ayasofya. Because this sentence, which is false, says, okay, you can do whatever you want because it is not under the protection of foundation law. It doesn't have a foundation, so you can change it into a museum, into a library, into a theater, whatever you want. Taking this official letter, the Prime Ministry prepared the famous decree of statute change. And this decree starts with the mentioned writings, correspondence between the Minister of Education and the Director of Foundations. The decree starts with this correspondence. They say, we asked them, and they said, this is not a foundation, you can read this. Therefore, in order to preserve the beauties of the old history, and in order to open these archaeological remainings to all humanity, we decided to change the status of Ayasofya from mosque to a museum. I spent a lot of time in order to explain this because we just close our eyes to the decision of the High Court. We do not, we generally do not read what it includes, but we talk about other things. The High Court in Turkey, just 15 days ago, 20 days ago, decided that this is a foundation, and according to law, nobody can, even the state, cannot change the status of it. Therefore, it is not something that the court decided to transform a church into a mosque. This is not something the court decided to completely change the decree of 1934. What court legally stated that this was a foundation, and 1934 decree just closed the eyes to this reality, and it was based on the false knowledge. So in order to understand the legal aspect of this, I gave a lot of time. Sorry for this.
Thank you very much. And I just want to follow up with another question. So this decision was made in 1934. What was the public's reaction for it? Was there any kind of, like the protest? What are the, at that time, the newspapers wrote about that? Because even we know that even after it started to kind of enter the restoration period, with the first decree, actually, with the permission of the Turkish government, there was a lot of debate and rumor that it may not open again. So what was the public's reaction for that?
There are a lot of newspaper articles.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of announcements of people, particularly intellectuals. Among them, there are politicians as well. Because as I mentioned, Abidin Özmen, the then Minister of Education, says during the discussion, some of the members of the party that time some politicians, some intellectuals openly reacted to this decision. But, you know, during that time, whatever you react, it was limited because your paper is closed, you can be arrested. So these things happened many times. Even after the Democratic Party came to power in 1950, many intellectuals in Turkey who wanted to reopen Ayasofya as a mosque, they were jailed and they were sentenced. Therefore, the reaction was limited, but there was a reaction. I also wanted to mention something very interesting. It was not only Hagia Sophia. As Mehmet Akif Kreşçi mentioned Sultanahmet, which is very close to Ayasofya. According to Cumhuriyet newspaper, which was one of the important newspapers of that time, and it was very related to the People's Republican Party, according to Cumhuriyet, some politicians in CHP, they even planned to change the status of Sultanahmet into a library. And it was published in this paper. They said there was a decision taken to change the status of Blue Mosque, Sultanahmet, into a library, and it was published in this paper. But this decision was not realized. I think mainly because of the concern of large public reaction after Hagia Sophia, what would happen if Sultanahmet was changed into a library.
Yeah, there were, I think, other proposals as well to turn Blue Mosque into a museum, and discussions about the lighting and how can it become more bright inside at that period. And now, Professor Kireçi, now fast forwarding today, how this debate started. We know that there is a civil society organization, Sürekli Vakıflar Tarihi Eserlere ve Çevreye Hizmet Derneği. I don't know how to translate this into English. It is a civil society group that was established a long time ago and working actually on these decisions, and particularly about the Ayasofya. So how this decision was made and what was the process? We know that there was earlier decisions about the Ayasofya Mosque in Trabzon, in Kariye Mosque in Istanbul. So can you tell us a little bit about the process?
Well, this symbolism of Hagia Sophia for Turkish people is very important because for generations people wanted, at least the conservative people wanted Ayasofya to revert back to its original or earlier status of mosque. There were certain demands, signature collection efforts. During 1960s, 1980s, people made some efforts, but they always repelled back. Like Professor Erhan mentioned, some of them even mentioned if you publish an article demanding that or indicating that hence Hagia Sophia should be reverted back to a mosque or something. There was a huge sort of expectation on the part of the conservative population in Turkey. Partly earlier, some worship efforts actually, some location within the museum were devoted for Muslims for their worship, but it was a very, very, very small corner. But this sort of civil society organization you mentioned took this issue for, I mean, almost this group of gentlemen. He's now a very old person. He's been trying to solve this issue from one court to another, once again, several times, one after another, for almost 2 decades now, I read, if I'm not mistaken, that this legal case is continuing for about 2 decades. And the decision, actually, this is the sort of a appeals court. It can translate into appeals court in the United States system. From the several local steps, the case was brought to appeals court, and then they tried it. And since Professor Erhan mentioned the major reason for the changing of the Hagia Sophia status was that there was no foundation. And in fact, there was a foundation, and that foundation has been continuing. Even several years ago, there was a university established based on the income generating out of this foundation in Istanbul, Mehmet II University, Fatih Sultan Mehmet II University in Istanbul. So the foundation does exist and has been operating still. And the foundation directorate is in charge of taking care of all the records of those foundations, incomes of those foundations, and then whatever the deeds indicate, the directorate is trying to sort of fulfill those demands. The ones which are within the Turkey's borders, by the way. There are several other foundations were now lost in the Balkans, in the Middle East, in other places, in former Ottoman territories. So this decision came out of that civil society organization's efforts, and the same day President Erdoğan issued a decree that it is the status of the Ayasofya is now a mosque. So the point here is that maybe we'll discuss UNESCO in a bit, but the major issue with UNESCO is that the local people must own whatever the monument is registered under the World Heritage system. With the 350 people, despite the COVID pandemic, trying to celebrate, trying to take part in the opening ceremony, indicates that there is a local ownership. And I am now suspecting that these visitations are going to continue for years to come, it seems, from different parts of Anatolia, from different parts of Turkey, and perhaps from different parts of other countries. This is how it actually ended up. Why now is maybe a major question we need to tackle, is that earlier perhaps the social and political climate was not necessarily ready for this. Perhaps there was a legal reasoning was not ready for this. But what is going to happen to the monument is actually, maybe in the second round, we will discuss that whether this decision is going to help the Ayasofya to be preserved better or not. Maybe we can discuss that in the second round. But this is how actually it ended up with the court decision, High Appeal Court's decision.
I will follow up with the UNESCO part, but just want to make sure that I did this announcement. For those who are in the Zoom, if you have questions, you can write it. You can start writing on the chat box or Q&A box in the Zoom. And if you are following through YouTube and Twitter, you can just write a comment as a question, and my assistants will collect those questions and convey to me. And Professor Kireçi, you are also Deputy Chairman of Turkish National Commission for UNESCO. And just before the opening of Ayasofya as a mosque, UNESCO Secretary General made a statement sharing some concern with Turkey about the status of Ayasofya. And she said she regrets that there wasn't a prior discussion about this. What was this statement and how you interpret that?
Well, as we all know, and as we all take a big pride in this, Ayasofya is registered as UNESCO World Heritage Site within the Sultanahmet archaeological site. The whole region is actually, the old city in Istanbul actually is a very important cultural heritage site, but there are lists, and Ayasofya entered to this list in 1985. And what happens is that it is a sort of an agreement between UNESCO and the other party, the state, the Turkish government, that it is about preservation of this monument. The status changing issues are not dealt with UNESCO historically, which, for instance, we have witnessed in the Grand Mosque in Cordoba, for instance. when that was a mosque, it was changed, the status was changed into a museum, and then later on maybe a site. People even, when they are trying to perform religious practices, as far as Muslims are concerned, they were stopped. UNESCO did not interfere in that decision-making mechanisms. But when it came to Ayasofya, UNESCO took a very interesting political position, and then they demanded a prior discussion before we take this decision. The Turkish government took this decision. But this is not sort of customary to UNESCO affairs. What the governments do usually is that they notify UNESCO if there is a change in the status of cultural site, World Heritage site. So, which we did through our permanent representative in Paris, our ambassador notified UNESCO, and right now we have a mechanism through National Commission, through permanent representative of Turkish government in UNESCO, in Paris to UNESCO, and then UNESCO headquarters with World Heritage Organization. We have a mechanism, we share information, we take their requests and concerns into account, and we work through with them. The main objective here is that how we help preserve this historic monument, not because it is registered in UNESCO World Heritage List, which it is, but because we sort of dearly value this site. Further, I have to mention, which I think is a very critical issue, as we, for instance, our audience maybe wouldn't know, if this site is a museum, Ministry of Culture and Tourism is in charge of that site. Again, through UNESCO National Commission, we are in cooperation and in communication with the Ministry of Culture and Tourism. But if it's converted to a mosque, Religious Affairs, Directorate of Religious Affairs is in charge. So what happened is that, which I think for audience abroad is very important, very critical to know, that there is a protocol prepared and signed between the Ministry of Culture and Tourism and also the Religious Affairs Directorate, inscribing all of the expectations of UNESCO, UNESCO's World Heritage concerns, that they are going to be respected, taken care of, and so on and so forth. So the only, in terms of the functionality of the building, its status change from a museum to a mosque, as far as Turkish authorities are concerned. It was one of the most income-generating museum in Turkey. On an annual basis, I think, as far as I remember, more than 2 million visitors were entering the building. It is now converted to a house of worship, and it is going to be, Muslims are going to enter the building on a very controlled manner. It's not people flocking in the building, it's controlled. The governor of Istanbul established many observation sites around the entry of the mosque, Ayasofya. And also there's another issue. There are a lot of fresks, there are a lot of pictures on the walls, fresks, and very important of nature to the history of the building, when it coming from its history of church. They are mostly in the gallery, which is in the second floor. They are still going to be preserved, well preserved, and whatever is being done in order to preserve those sites and those galleries are going to be continued, perhaps with more care. I believe there will be certain passages to be banned for mass entry. Turkish government, as far as I can observe so far, taking every measure in order to preserve the historical value of this monument, and then at the same time let Muslim people to perform their prayers within the building. It is now, again, a house of worship, and hopefully with the ownership of Turks and other communities, Muslims and Christians, it is going to be preserved for several centuries to come. It is our pride that we preserve this building with much effort and admiration. Again, it is open during the prayer times, it's open for Muslims, and if the time is not for prayer, it is open for all visitors, Christians, Jews, non-believers, Muslims, or whatever. It is going to be open again. The functionality of the monument as a museum is going to continue as a de facto, which I must state. And as a UNESCO National Commission, we also are trying to make efforts, certain issues to bring the officials that they would pay the utmost care in order to preserve the historical value of the building.
So you responded actually one of the questions. There were some questions about the how it will be preserved once it will turn into a mosque, return into a mosque actually, because there was some, at least on the social media, there were some tweets about the fact that it has been preserved by a group of experts when it was basically connected to the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, and if it would be protected in the same degree if it was returned into.
Oh, definitely, there are several experts who are involved. Any changes, any issues, any problems. Look, this is a very old building. It's almost
1,500 years old.
1,500 years of old building. There are a lot of issues all the time in this building. Reparations, preservations efforts always continuing. So there are several scholars, several experts who are part of this community, overseeing what's going on. Like I mentioned in the introduction, even if a small brick is going to change, there are a lot of experts are involved. So it's not a sort of boom, everything is changed. No, it's not going to work that way. It's going to be preserved. It's going to be valued dearly as it was before.
Professor Erhan, I want to go back to Turkish-US relations. And Thomas Whitmore and the Byzantine Institute was an important part of this decision. And now, fast forwarding again today, how you interpret the US reaction? There was a statement from Committee on International Religious Freedom. Then there was two tweets, one from Secretary of State Pompeo and one from Vice President Pence. How you interpret these reactions from the US?
I understand there are two aspects of these reactions. The first aspect is lack of knowledge, lack of information. Because as you mentioned, and Professor Krejci mentioned, unfortunately, particularly in social media and with the supporters of Greek lobby in the United States, what is being done reflected highly different in the United States and in many European countries. Turkey did not build these 4 minarets on the 24th of July this year. These 4 minarets were there for centuries. So Turkey did not decide to change a church or transform a church, convert a church into a mosque all of a sudden. But when we check with some of the social media tweets or whatever in the US media, some correspondents, their columnists, they write, whether they know the reality or not, but they write that Turkey, all of a sudden, President Erdoğan decided to convert a church into a mosque. This is totally false. Therefore, I believe one aspect of the reactions, one reason of the reactions depend on this lack of knowledge or lack of enough information. The second one is political, of course. US elections is upcoming. You will have elections in the first Tuesday of November. Therefore, both parties, Republicans and Democrats, they want to gain the votes of first the Greek Orthodox Church members in the United States, which is not less than 1 million, as I believe, voters, and then some other Christian religious communities. That's why, as some previous incidents, like the Pastor Brunson incident, some of the politicians exaggerated the situation, and they felt themselves to make some announcements to appease their supporters, particularly among these mentioned communities. But in near future, I believe, the status of Ayasofya will not affect the main course of Turkish-American relations. It is not a major issue in Turkish-American relations. We have more important, if we say, problems in bilateral relations, and we have more important areas of cooperation in Turkish-American relations. So the status of Ayasofya will not have a major change in Turkish-American relations course.
How do you interpret the Greek reaction for it? Probably the strongest reaction came from Greece. And how do you interpret that reaction?
Surprisingly, the Greece government think they are the successors of Byzantine Empire, which is historically wrong. The Republic of Greece, then the Kingdom of Greece, and it will become a republic in 1960s, was established in 1829 after Turkish-Russian War. Therefore, when Greece was established as an independent kingdom, Ayasofya was a mosque for more than 300 years. Therefore, it was quite ununderstandable why Greece made such a reaction. Yes, we in Turkey and Turkish government as well knows the importance of this holy place for the Orthodox society. It was the center of patriarchate for decades and for centuries. But when Fatih Sultan Mehmed II converted the temple into a mosque, then the Greek patriarchate, Greek Orthodox patriarchate, was given another place in Istanbul, and they are now proud of the decree of Muhammad II, which gave them the freedom and showed the tolerance to function their religion. Without this decree was given, we are talking about the 15th century. And as Professor Krekci mentioned, the situation of Cordoba Mosque. Do you know what happened when in 1493, Isabel de Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon conquered Andalusia? What happened to the Muslims and Jews in this area? Therefore, the level of and the degree of tolerance and freedom of religion was well above when compared to contemporary practices of 15th century. Therefore, I see Greece's reaction is a totally exaggeration. It is something to show the Greek government's position to their supporters. When it comes to orthodoxy, it is quite important for all Greek governments, even for the communists, which came to power a few years ago in Greece.
Thank you very much. Professor Krekci, there are questions about, one, the status of churches in Turkey. So there are some comments that other churches may face the same fate, same outcome and turn into a mosque. You know, how many churches are there and what is the status of that? And related to that, there are some comments about the secularism in Turkey after the Ayasofya decision. Can you elaborate those issues a little bit?
Well, I don't know how many churches were converted to mosque during the Ottoman times. There were several, but the point is that they are preserved as places of worship. This is the perspective, the way I look at it, whether the building is intact or not. From the cultural perspective, history of culture and universal value perspective, the preservation of the building is one of the major issues. That's how at least UNESCO treats these issues. I believe there are more than 100 churches operating in Istanbul, and then in Turkey maybe hundreds more in other parts of Turkey. There is not that much a question. If I need to remind our audience that, for instance, Sümela is now opened for visitors, which was in Istanbul, was under constant restoration.
In
Trabzon. Okay.
Yes.
What did I say?
Istanbul.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought about Trabzon, but I said Istanbul. Yeah, it's now open for visitors. Regarding the secularism, this is not, well, like Professor Erhan mentioned, Greece is trying to internationalize this issue. But I think this is a very local issue as far as Turkey is concerned. How can you change the status of secular state? You can change the status of a secular state with issuing new laws based on religious norms. This has nothing to do with that. This is a sort of a cultural, changing a trait of a cultural site into a mosque. This does not indicate any government decree, any law regarding how you make your laws, what are your inspirations when you are issuing laws in your parliament, what kind of sort of legal mechanism is functioning in your country. On that ground, Turkey is a very firmly grounded in its system. It's a republic and it's a secular republic. It's a social state, as many times our government officials indicated. I don't think that's that's an issue, but it is exaggerated from time to time. We need to be aware of when practicing Muslims are in the government is one thing, when people are trying to change the government system is another. This has nothing to do with the government system at all.
And there is two questions we got from the audience. One is about the Vakfiye, actually, a detailed question, Professor Kireçi. What are the businesses specified in the Vakfiye that generates the income for Ayasofya? Are additional funds, state or personal, voluntary required for maintenance of Ayasofya? If so, what is the percentage of maintenance funds strictly from Vakfiye resources?
I am now embarrassed. I don't know the percentages, but when Mehmet II founded, for instance, shops, a lot of shops who are rented out of a Vakfiye, out of this foundation, their incomes, after they paid their spendings, major spendings, paid the salaries of their workers, go to the foundation. For instance, there are a lot of lands, villages. Let's imagine that, for instance, there is an olive land, tens of thousands of olive trees. A lot of people are appointed to take care of those trees, produce olive oil out of those olives, and then when they are sold, the workers' payments are paid, and then the remaining parts of the income are devoted to these foundations. The people who are working for the upbringing of the monument is also paid by these foundations. from time to time, members of the royal family contributed to these foundations personally or within their own foundation capacity. There are tens of thousands of foundations within the Ottoman context, and those who remain or those who survive to the Republican period and those who have functions, they are also taken care of, observed, and overseen by the General Directorate of Foundations, which takes care of every single foundation ever founded, if they have still relevant incomes or relevant lands or shops. From time to time in Istanbul, there are many. They go on bid, for instance, the foundation building, who is going to pay the most rent for this building, and they take the building, they pay the rent, and the certain percentage of that income goes to the foundation. This is still partly operational within the Republican system as far as it is possible.
Thank you. Professor Erhan, there is a couple questions about if Ayasofya can set a precedent for other countries to change the status of the temples in their countries to something else. There is more specific question about Israel that I see. So do you think this Ayasofya decision should set a precedent for other countries as well to change the status of the temples in their countries?
I hope so. All museums, which was previously a mosque, can be turned into their original status, like the mosque in Cordoba. It must be a precedent for Spanish government, for instance, because it's a museum now. I hope it will be changed into its original status as a mosque. So Turkey did not change the status of a mosque or of a museum into another functional building. It was a temple previously, and it was changed converted into a museum, as I mentioned, based on the false knowledge about its status. Now, Turkey took it back to its original status. It is now open to all believers who come, and they can come and worship in this mosque. And I also I try to create a similarity with other monuments around the world. Take, for instance, the Sistine Chapel in Vatican. It is one of the most important and holiest places of the Holy See. And it's open for tourists. And it's also open for worshippers. Take Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. It is one of the biggest and most important temples of Catholic Christendom. It is open for mass. It is open for worshippers. It is now under, of course, construction after this fire. But it was and it will be open for worshippers. But at the same time, me, myself, as a Muslim, can visit it during the designated times. And it will be same for tourists who are coming to Turkey, to Istanbul. Anyone can be able to visit as a tourist the Hagia Sophia site. So you are not limited to be a Muslim worshipper coming to the prayer time, and it will be open for 24 hours, by the way. Therefore, it does not create any similarity to the situation in Israel. It's completely different. But I hope it will be a precedent for Spain.
Mm-hmm. Professor Kireçi, there is a question for you about the question actually I asked earlier to Professor Erhan, if it will create any issue between Turkey and United States, or if it would impact Turkey's membership to UNESCO.
No, I don't think so, because we notified UNESCO, World Heritage Organization, through our ambassador in Paris. Turkey actually promised to preserve this monument as a very valuable cultural site and it is Turkey is going to keep its promises. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a mechanism and agreement. We are in communique with UNESCO people all the time, not only through our permanent representative in Paris to UNESCO, but also UNESCO National Commission for Turkey, which is a sort of a coordination agency, local coordination agency between the different ministries. I don't think there is an issue in terms of Turkey's promises, in terms of Turkey's obligations, like any other site in Turkey. There are other sites inscribed within World Heritage Site, which has been coming from, or we inherited from Selçuk times, 850 years old monuments we have in Eastern Turkey. In Konya, we have for instance, Blue Mosque. This is an archaeological site as a whole, is part of the World Heritage. Istanbul Old City is very much in close care of UNESCO experts, and they always come and visit. If they have certain suggestions, we try to take them in account. We try to observe them. Look, this is a very, very important monument. Not only this, but also Selimiye in Edirne, for instance. We have many sites. We are right now, I believe, more than 70 in the waiting list, because earlier decades, Turkish authorities were very slow in order to register monuments into World Heritage Sites. It's taking time for new additions to get into the list. It is a very expensive business to take care of these monuments, historical monuments. I mean, the technology, the stone, the methodology, the sort of ingredients which are used in these buildings, even the guarding of these buildings are very expensive. And I think Turkey is doing a very fine job, very good job in terms of preserving all of these sites. In terms of Turkish-American relations, I don't think this should be a big issue, because we have a lot of issues to solve with America, to work with America. We have many other issues to work with America and our local partners in our surrounding Turkey and in our neighborhood. The big crisis now inflicted upon many populations and many countries before and after COVID-19. So we need to focus on establishing stability and peace and cooperation within and around Turkey, within and around the Balkans and Eastern Mediterranean, Western Mediterranean, Black Sea. We are here to maintain stability, peace, and cooperation.
One last question. We are almost done. Professor Erhan, there is another question about Eastern Mediterranean this time, and whether the Ayasofya decision intensifies.
It's 18 hours.
Whether the Ayasofya decision will intensify the crisis between Turkey and Greece in Eastern Mediterranean.
Well, it will not add anything. It's already a serious problem we have in Eastern Mediterranean, because Greece violates the Turkish rights in the Eastern Mediterranean. They insist on their illegal claims of having a large area of sovereignty, naval area of sovereignty in Eastern Mediterranean. And now, as far as I understand, there will be a new round of exploratory talks between Turkey and Greece. After the earthquakes in 1999, almost 21 years ago, Turkey and Greece started a meeting round, which they called explorative talks, in order to first find the problems between these two countries and then to create some solutions. And in line with this exploratory talks, both countries also put into force some 18 measures of confidence or confidence building measures or confidence increasing measures, particularly about the military maneuvers and actions of military powers in the Aegean Sea and Eastern Mediterranean. And now, as far as I understand, nobody in both sides and nobody in Europe, particularly Germany, they don't want an escalation of this area. But on the other hand, Turkey's stance is very clear. This is a matter of sovereignty, and Turkey will not let Greece or any other country to go beyond their borders and violate Turkish sovereign rights. And Turkey is also respectful for all sovereign rights for all of other states, including Greece, in this land. So the situation of Hagia Sophia just brought an opportunity to Greece government to give a popular message to their society in this stage. But well before the Ayasofya decision, for almost months, since January this year, after the signature of Turkish-Libyan agreement about the demarcation of the naval border, there was a reaction from Greece, and they tried to get some allies in order to fortify their position against Turkey.
Thank you very much. And I know that we have like 5-6 more questions, but time is up for today. And I know that both Professor Kireçi and Professor Erhan have...
Excuse me, but I have to add just one more sentence about the situation of Greece. Yeah. I forgot to mention it when I was commenting on their reaction to Turkey. We should underline that Athens is the only European capital without a mosque in Europe. So this is a reality. Any government in Greece, I think, don't have a right to any say about the freedom of religion when they don't even have a mosque in their capital. They have thousands and hundreds of thousands of Muslim minorities in this capital city.
Thank you very much. And thank you for both Professor Kireçi and Professor Erhan for this lively discussion. And
thank you for your invitation.
We hope we will host you again soon about some other developments more specific on Eastern Mediterranean and Libya. But this was an important topic. Thank you for this. We kind of, try to reach you at the very last minute. Thank you for agreeing on that, and hope to see you again. And we want to thank for the audience for the questions and comments. And I know I couldn't ask all of those questions, but if you want to reach out Professor Erhan and Professor Kireçi, their emails are probably available. You can reach them out, or you can send your questions to us so that we can convey them to our panelists. Thank you very much, and hope to see you in our next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.